The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the webinar, The Intersection of E-Patients and Providers, Where's the Sweet Spot? We'll be featuring our three speakers, Hope Warshaw, Deborah Greenwood, and Sharice Shockley. My name is Susan Eno-Collins. I'm the Community Leader for Surround Health, and I'm really excited to see so many people who have logged on for today's call. What I'd like to do is first start by introducing the three speakers and tell you a little bit about their backgrounds. We'll do a little bit of housekeeping, and then we will jump right into the presentations. Our first speaker today is Hope Warshaw. Hope has been a dietitian and certified diabetes educator for over 3 decades. In her consulting practice, Hope Warshaw Associates, located in Northern Virginia, she's a consultant to companies and associations in the diabetes and nutrition area. She's also a freelance writer and author of numerous consumer books published by American Diabetes Association and provides face-to-face and online diabetes and weight management counseling. About 4 years ago, Hope jumped into social media as a means to connect with colleagues and people with diabetes and caregivers. Our second speaker will be Deborah Greenwood. Deborah is a diabetes clinical nurse specialist and program coordinator for Sutter Health Integrated Diabetes Education Network in Sacramento, California. She is also a PhD candidate, completing her degree in nursing science and healthcare leadership this spring. Her research interests focus on the use of health information technology to improve the quality of diabetes prevention, care, education, and support. She has published and lectured on health technology and the emerging concept of the e-patient. She is currently President-elect of the American Association of Diabetes Educators. And our third speaker is Sharice Shockley, founder and CEO at Diabetes Community Advocacy Foundation. She's an avid blogger and hosts DSMA Live on Twitter. We are so excited to have all three of the speakers here. And before I turn the presentation over to them, I would like to take a moment to, first of all, thank our sponsor, HealthEd, who's made this webinar possible. HealthEd is a patient engagement company who for over 25 years, or 25 years actually in April, has been working to develop educational solutions for patients and providers to help support their skills, education, and tools for successful outcomes. To learn more about HealthEd, you can visit healthed.com. And again, we thank HealthEd for their generous sponsorship of today's webinar. Okay, a few just quick housekeeping pieces. If you have questions at all during the webinar, please type them in the questions section in your panel of the webinar dashboard, and we will get back to you. For all of those who are on Twitter, and hopefully more of you will be by the time we get done with today's webinar, we're using the hashtag #SHWebinar, and we join you to tweet along with us. This webinar is being recorded and archived, so we will make it available. You will actually get an email letting you know when the archive is available. And our speakers are going to be talking about various resources that they think will be helpful for you. We will go ahead and create a resource list that will be available via the archive as well. And finally, this program has been approved for 1 CHES and 1 RD, or continuing education credit. And please be sure to complete the feedback survey at the end of the webinar. The survey will pop up once you leave the webinar, and then the certificate will be available in your Surround Health profile starting tomorrow. So that is all of the housekeeping slides, and I'd really like to turn it over. Before I turn it over, I wanted to actually go through one quick poll, and then I'll turn it over to Hope. So let me just launch our first poll for the audience to answer, and just give me 1 second to get that going. Our first poll today is, what is the biggest concern, is your biggest concern about the emergence of e-patients? You could just select one answer. One is you're not sure where to refer patients to online. One is you're concerned they've received misinformation. Third answer may generate more patient questions, not enough time to stay abreast of the topic, or none of the above. Please go ahead and vote. We'll give this about 30 seconds. I can see a quarter of people have voted. Again, all you need to do is click on one answer and your vote will be logged. And again, we will give us about 30 more seconds. I can see half the people have voted, so no one else sees your answer. We just see it in aggregate, so it's never known who's answering what. Go ahead and answer. We'll give it 10 more seconds. Okay, we have about everybody who has voted. Let me go ahead and show you the results. And here you can see, looks like one of the leading concerns among the audience today is the concern about misinformation, and then secondly, not too sure where to refer patients to online. So with that, let me turn over the presentation to Hope, and just give me 1 second to give you the controls, Hope.
Technology.
Technology, I know. And Hope, you should be able to move the slide. Whoops, the other way.
Great. Yes, I am. Okay. So let me just jump in. So thank you, Susan, and I'm pleased to be with everyone today to discuss this emerging and important topic in healthcare. I'm also happy to play the role somewhat of moderator MC and to present with my two colleagues, Deborah Greenwood and Charisse Shockley. So let's just jump in to talk about what we'll cover today. And I will start out with a small amount of background on this paradigm shift. So moving from healthcare providers as gatekeepers to people with a disease or with an effort to prevent a disease who are engaging online using technology. I would say that this is very much in its infancy state and in transition. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Deborah Greenwood will come in and talk about the implications of this shift, of how we as healthcare providers can adapt by using some different tools and approaches that are out there to communicate with clients and to educate them in engaging in this manner. And then Charisse Shockley will give us her first-hand account from an online community advocate with diabetes. So how she has engaged, how other people with diabetes are engaging as e-patients to foster support and knowledge. And I would put a heavy underline on support. So it's always good to start with a bit of humor. And this slide, some of you might have seen with a different theme. But in this slide, it shows using a donut, how using the many different social media vehicles or mediums that one might approach discussing eating a donut. So on Twitter, someone may say, I'm eating a donut with the number mark in front of it, which, for those of you who don't know about Twitter, that indicates that that's a hashtag. Just sort of running down a few of these, Foursquare is sort of a locator, where am I, sort of social media, and so someone might say, this is where I eat donuts. We've got YouTube, LinkedIn, Pinterest, which is very visual and lends itself well to recipes. Someone might put, here's my donut recipe for fudgy chocolate donuts. And I would say the last on the list is Google+. From everything that I'm hearing, Google+ is very much in its infancy, but seems to be also very much a growing medium. So let me reflect for just a moment about why I embarked and engaged on using social media, particularly in and with the diabetes online community. As Susan said, I've been a dietitian and diabetes educator for around 3 decades and counting. In around 2010, I observed that social media was catching on both among my dietitian and diabetes educator peers, particularly dietitian peers. And then I also was seeing this growing group of people with diabetes who were engaging online. There were several blogs that were being initiated, and I really saw it as a valuable vehicle both for myself professionally as well as for people with diabetes. So I took the initiative to reach out to several key leaders in the diabetes online community, and with those 3 other people, we have presented programs at the Diabetes Educator Meeting, AADE, for the last 3 years in an effort to connect diabetes educators to social media, to educate them, to invite them in, but also, very importantly, to encourage them to encourage their clients to connect online, to get the kind of support that people with diabetes so badly need. So I feel like I have been, to an extent, a champion for the last number of years for the diabetes online community. One of the things I've done, as you can see on the slides on my website, is a series, what I call dialoguing about diabetes, which are interviews with different people engaged with the online community about helping sort of improve the communication between people with diabetes and clinicians. So that's how some of the ways that I have engaged. I think it's important for me to say that overwhelmingly I have felt very welcomed by the community. So this is mostly people with diabetes, mainly people with type 1 diabetes. But at the same time, I feel that it's been very important for me to practice respect of their space and to know my place. So I hopefully have accomplished that goal as well, and I think we can talk about that a little bit more at the end. So we have clearly entered the era of the e-patient, and these are just some definitions, by no means all definitions, that I pulled. One being patients and caregivers who are equipped and enabled and empowered and engaged in their health care. The next definition is from the Pew Internet, the Pew Charitable Trust. They follow what's going on with social media, and I particularly like this definition. It's peer-to-peer health care is a way for people to do what they've always done, to lend a hand, lend an ear, and lend advice. But this is now at internet speed and at internet scale. And then I thought it was important to note that within the Affordable Care Act, there is identification around patient engagement as an integral component of quality in accountable care organizations and patient-centered medical homes. This next slide speaks to the value of online e-patient communities, and it pulls from a small study done out of Australia but reported in an American publication from the American Diabetes Association, Diabetes Spectrum, which is focused towards particularly nurses, dietitians, diabetes educators in general. So what the study pulled out was that the concepts that were identified by the people with diabetes, PWD, and healthcare professionals fit broadly within the definition of peer support. And I know in the diabetes world we are certainly hearing more and more about the value of peer support. And then there were other factors that the people with diabetes in this study reported as positives of being an e-patient, that they got ongoing social and emotional support, that they felt supported, and that they were also giving support. And I think that can't be underestimated, the the value of someone giving support as well as also getting support. Self-reflection, connection and interaction with peers, and lastly, a sense of community. So what are the trends driving this e-patient paradigm shift? I think there are many, and they really fit within the whole paradigm shift that we're seeing within healthcare transformation, and then partner that with all of the changes going on in our wired world. So there is clearly a transition from managing predominantly acute diseases to today managing more chronic diseases. We are slowly moving, hopefully more and more, from provider to patient-centered care to what experts seem to be pointing to in the future of more and more personalized care. There's recognition of the need and role of support to improve clinical outcomes, and there's clearly a need to focus on prevention. The reality is we now have the technologies. These technologies are enabling people to access vast amounts of information. People can be globally connected instantaneously. I mean, I just answered an email. Someone said, well, do you want to connect by Skype or Google Hangout? Or I mean, there's just so many ways that we can connect, and that social media just enables these social networks to develop. And so we've got a lot of technology capabilities, and I think that we all realize in healthcare that we are seeing dramatic changes, whether it's due to the Affordable Care Act or pushes from our healthcare systems, and technology is enabling a lot of these. So there are a lot of trends driving this e-patient paradigm shift. This quote is from a very recent article that I picked up actually in Twitter, off of Twitter, and it is written by Ann Cooper, is a clinical informatics advisor. Both of these people are in the UK, and Dr. Carr is a consulting endocrinologist. Their quote was, healthcare professionals should not ignore these emerging trends and should seek ways to understand how they can participate and support. This was specific to people with diabetes, but I think you could insert a variety of different chronic diseases to use this rich resource. And my last slide pulls a few quotes from an interview from diabetesmind.com. Diabetesmind.com is one of the leading diabetes blogs. And this was an interview from David Keir, who is coming from the UK to the US to be the Director of Diabetes Research and Innovation at a well-known diabetes research institute in Santa Barbara, the Samsung Diabetes Research Institute. And I think I'll just hit on a couple of key points here. The second quote is, we have to be cautious about confidentiality and about making sure we're reaching the right people. And the last quote is, the movement to democratize health and collaborate with healthcare professionals and change healthcare is unstoppable. That doesn't mean it's going to be smooth. It is going to be very bumpy. And with that, I'll turn it back to Susan.
Great. Thank you so much, Hope. We appreciate it. And we're going to turn it over to Deborah. We're just going to work to give you control of the slides. Just one moment. Hope, and Deborah, just let Hope know when you're ready to move to the next slide. So I'll turn it over to Deborah.
Okay, great. You can advance to my first content slide, Hope, one more. Okay, great. Thanks again for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here and speaking with you all today. And I'd like to start with this slide because I think it helps set the context for the discussion. I mean, Hope already did a great job of setting the frame, and I'd like to echo that Hope definitely is a champion for this. So we know that with the growth of the smartphone, every day, there's a lot of data being transferred. Here's just some examples. 16 billion text messages, 141 million tweets. And I love this quote that every 2 days we actually create as much information as we did from the dawn of civilization up into 2003. Go ahead, next slide. Now, if we look at it a little bit closer, if you could advance to the next slide, we're going to look at what happens every minute. And I'm just going to grab a few of these to highlight. So every minute there's about 48 hours of YouTube videos that are uploaded, 100,000 tweets. And this is a minute. So it's really impossible in this world of rapidly generating data to assume that any healthcare provider can know it all or have read it all. It's just impossible. So these facts are some of what's forcing healthcare to rethink how it's delivered, how data is analyzed, and again, how support is provided, and then that key role that patients need to take in their healthcare. Next slide. Hope introduced, oops, there we go. Hope introduced the term democratization of knowledge, and this is really why. The balance of power is shifting because everyone has access to the same data now. It's not only for those who have money or power, which was the history and often equaled healthcare providers. Social media is always available. People can search for information and find support at any hour of the day. And there's a great opportunity to share with peers, and those peers provide a unique perspective that a healthcare provider can't always provide if they're not living with and managing a disease on a daily basis. Additionally, personal health records that are often connected with electronic health records are enabling data sharing between patients and their healthcare team, and actually some research has shown that patients are actually identifying errors in their healthcare records, so it's actually creating more safety in care. When we think about telehealth, especially mHealth, there's an increase in access, communication, and knowledge that really was been unheard of in past generations. There really is a need for clinicians to support e-patients, as we've just heard, but with a focus in addition to care and education, but also in data interpretation, because along with disease management, disease self-management, there's also this new requirement of data self-management, and that's a whole other genre to talk about. Next slide. So the government knows this balance is happening, that the balance is shifting, and they're trying to be a facilitator. There are many initiatives that I'm sure you're aware of that we're not going to go into here, but like meaningful use and high tech. And I thought I'd just point out this specific initiative because it does focus on consumer engagement, and I equate that with e-patients in this talk. And if you've never gone to healthit.gov, I encourage you to do that. This is just a very brief overview of a very big campaign that they have, and their focus is on the 3 A's to consumer engagement, and that's increasing access to patients' health information, and some of those are the meaningful use and personal health record features. Also creating opportunities to take action with their information, whether that's with mHealth and integrating data, et cetera. The Blue Button Pledge, if you've heard of that, where people can download all their data with a push of a button. And finally, focus on shift in attitudes, and that's specifically with providers, but also with patients that are of an older generation that really believe that healthcare providers shouldn't be questioned. So there are those attitudes as well. So healthcare providers really need to understand the role, that social media and technology play in a person that lives with a chronic disease, and help partner with those individuals. So what we're discussing today is not out there. It's not something that's crazy. It's a known goal, and it's a required shift. And as Hope said, doesn't mean it's not going to be bumpy, but we know we need to do it. Next slide, please. I wanted to point out this model that we use as a framework around the concept of patient and provider engagement and collaboration. We call this the DIKW collaboration model. This began with a focus in informatics using a traditional informatics framework called DIKW that really categorizes the process of learning in these 4 steps. First, we start with data. Data becomes information. Information then generates knowledge, and then eventually we have some wisdom from that knowledge. So our premise is that both a clinician and an e-patient go through these same stages when they're faced with data, information, knowledge, etc. However, individuals go through on their own, these steps with their own frame of reference, with their own background. And when we talk about informatics here, we're talking about anything from mHealth to social media to telehealth or all of the above. So as we go through these processes, if providers and patients can collaborate together in any and all stages of this progress, our hope is that at the end of the day, we can have a collective wisdom that's greater than any of each individual's own wisdom. And so I'd like you to think about this framework as we finish our discussion today and as we share resources, and then as you leave and go out into the world and go about your daily business. Okay, next slide, please. So a little bit of background in terms of how I got here. I'm thinking about Hope's introduction. So I'm actually finishing up a doctoral program, and it's in nursing science and healthcare leadership, but all of my electives have been focused in informatics. During the very first course I had, which is called The Internet and the Future of Patient Care, most of our assignments involved exploring and evaluating the Internet for healthcare information, and one of those things was online communities. So it was such a great course, and I'm so thankful that I was required to go online and spend time exploring and evaluating. I had to choose one site to write a paper about, and actually I chose Diabetes Mind, the diabetes online community that Hope mentioned a little while ago. And it was really through that experience, so this was back in 2010, that I really started to appreciate the quality of the content and the learning that was cultivated, and definitely the support that was fostered. One of the first kind of groups that I was introduced to when I was doing my search was this Society for Participatory Medicine. This is a group whose mission is to foster those 3 A's that we just talked about. Members are both patients and providers, and they're focusing on this changing relationships, changing attitudes. And their mission is that patients need to be, and I love this, the responsible drivers of their health care, where providers value this, encourage them, and consider them full partners. And their slogan is nothing about me without me. The co-chairs are a patient and provider team, and I'm curious how many of you may already know who I think is probably the most famous e-patient Dave, and he is one of the co-facilitators of this group. Next slide. So if I could see you, I'd ask you to raise your hand if you knew who e-patient Dave was, but I'll tell you a little bit. He's a speaker, advocate, e-patient who really has a compelling story, and if you've not watched his TED Talk, I would encourage you to watch it. There's a link here, or you can Google e-patient Dave TED Talk, and I will guarantee you will shed a tear or two. But very briefly tell you his story. He really credits an online cancer support group for saving his life after he was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney cancer and pretty much told to go home and enjoy a glass of wine with his wife. By having a very involved physician who encouraged him to go online, he learned about a research trial that eventually saved his life. He's definitely an outspoken member of the e-patient community. And I love this ad that they've used now in Health IT, that he beat cancer so he'd dance at his daughter's wedding. And I can happily tell you that he's now a grandfather and continuing his efforts to educate and empower people. Next slide. Another important group that's really supporting e-patients is patients like me. And there's another great TED Talk that talks about how this group was started, and it was two brothers whose third brother had Huntington's disease, and they really felt helpless, and they wanted to help him. And they were just struggling with the traditional methods, of course, in a disease like that where there's not a lot to offer. So they created this site to gather patient-generated data regarding symptom management. And although their brother did pass away, they've been continuing and helping others with many different diseases to learn from each other, to connect, and even more exciting, to conduct research. So next slide. So the mission of Patients Like Me is answering this question on the left. Given my status, what is the best possible outcome I can hope to achieve, and how do I get there? This is a social networking site, but they consider it a data-driven site. So when people sign up to be part of this network, they have to agree to share their data and enter their data for research purposes. So they know ahead of time that any data they choose to put in this site could be used for research at some point. And what I really like is that they share their research with their members in a very timely manner. There was a study published several years ago that collected symptom data about medication for Huntington's through this Patients Like Me website, and they learned more quickly than a research study that the medication didn't work. So the same conclusion was found in a clinical trial quite a while after this website and these patients actually experimenting in it was an off-label use of a medication that was, not experimental medication. So I just found that really exciting. And they have a new campaign they just started called Data for Good that is really encouraging people to donate their data and share their patient information. Okay, next slide. So they just conducted a research study this fall, and I am a member of Patients Like Me, so I completed this survey. I think it was around September, and then already by October, these results were published online for you to see. And there's a lot. It's kind of busy, but I just wanted you to see how they presented the data. These are just a few of the questions. There's many questions, but their graphics are great. It's very accessible, so that the outcomes can be looked at from an average person, not a researcher or a scientist. Just a few things to point out that they had over 5,000 participate in the survey. And for those of you who do research studies, you know this is a really good number. And they did this in a very short window of time, like 30 days they got this information out, maybe even less. And they learned that people that are on Patients Like Me and who took this survey were 9 times more likely to be at risk for insomnia than the general public. And there's some other things here you can see. And if you want to see all the data, you can go to Patients Like Me and look at their data. But what was also very exciting is that when they posted this data on their site, patients responded and were so thankful that they were sharing this information. And it was it was just, if you could go on the survey and read all the comments from patients responding back and just being thankful to be able to learn this information. It was really, I think, outstanding. Next slide. So the diabetes online communities, or that Hope referred to with the doc, is very active, especially for providing that ongoing support for people. For those of you that know diabetes, we have a process called diabetes self-management education. We know that's successful when we help people make behavior changes, but we also know that when we stop that content, 3 to 6 months later, people stop doing as well. Those behavior changes are hard to make, and we know we need ongoing support. And in the medical community, we don't always do a good job of that ongoing support. So the online communities is a fantastic way to keep people engaged and help them to maintain behaviors that they want to maintain for their chronic disease or what have you. So again, if you aren't familiar with some of these sites, I'd suggest you go through and check them out. They all have a slightly different focus and provide different opportunities. And when Cherise speaks, she's going to talk about this in a little bit more detail. But I thought I would just kind of pull out, next slide please, one site in particular that's focused on diabetes. It's called 2 Diabetes, and they also have a Spanish-speaking site called S2 Diabetes. And it's for anyone with diabetes What I find, so there's a couple things I find interesting. One, that it has over 200 communities that people log on and have discussions, and from type 1 to type 2 to gestational to family members, what have you. And then another thing that I'm really impressed with is their weekly live streaming interviews. They are patient talks on everything from the artificial pancreas to e-patients. So I was fortunate to be interviewed last October about e-patients and encouraging diabetes educators to engage in the diabetes online community. And I was asked really a lot of hard and challenging questions by people that were participating. And it just really strengthened my view that the diabetes online community is an essential part of life for e-patients with diabetes, and that these educational and support opportunities are going to be expanding. And so sort of as part of our mission to give you, to encourage you that these sites are safe and are informative and are valuable. Next slide. 2 Diabetes has also been involved with research. This is an example of where engaging people in research was much easier than in the general setting. They had 24% of their people that they asked participate. And I just did a recent study, and I only had 6% agree to participate. So, 24% again is huge. The focus of the study was actually on hypoglycemia with low blood glucose, but they also collected data about using online communities for research. It's a JAMA paper, and you can see where it's located. But also notice that 96% agreed to participate again, and almost a third posted their A1C on their profile page on 2 Diabetes and shared their information with other people. So again, another example that people want to engage, and these are great resources. Next page. Another exciting thing is that there's books being written, both for e-patients and also for providers. The book on the left, E-Patients Live Longer, is a short but very easily read book focused on patients and helping to guide them navigating healthcare using technology. The book on the right was written by our friend E-Patient Dave and is focused for healthcare providers. Again, a very easy read, short book, but it gives ideas for providers on how they can engage with patients, what questions to ask, what questions not to ask. And it's been received really good reviews, and actually some of the feedback that I've seen written is that some medical faculty are including this as required reading in some medical school curriculum, which is very good news for those of us, hoping to continue this change in this process. Next page. Here's another site that my colleague and I recently started on Facebook called the Collaborative Wisdom E-Community, in hopes of starting discussions between e-patients and diabetes educators. We're more educators at this point, but hoping to grow and expand. But even with that, just educating educators and helping people become comfortable is a good goal. So if you're interested in checking that out, please do. Next slide. Excuse me. So, what does this all mean, and what are some takeaways? So social networks and online data generation are here to stay, and they're only going to grow and expand. E-patients are sharing data that educators and providers probably don't have, which can improve care, and as we've seen in some studies, actually improve safety. When we work together, we can learn from each other and really learn things that we don't know. Just a really quick story. I was doing a study that involved technology and patient hard data, blood glucose data. I wasn't collecting kind of personal data, but when I went to write a paper and I asked this patient if I could use some of her information, she asked me if I wanted to have her journal, because she had been collecting a journal of her thoughts during the study. And having that journal was like the biggest gift for me, because I could sort of look at her evolution in her data, but then see her comments. And I learned some things that I never would have known because she wasn't sharing them with me just on a routine sort of clinical basis. And I really have grown through that myself as a person, as a clinician, and it's just really opened my eyes that we're going in the right direction. We need to keep going. And through this, e-patients are supporting health policy change. And we just, as I said, our goal is to develop a collaborative wisdom that's bigger than anyone's individual wisdom. Next page. So I'll just leave you with this quote. I love this quote because it focuses on our collaborative wisdom sort of framework. So data are widely available, but what is scarce is the ability to extract wisdom from them. So I hope that you've learned from these few resources that there is wisdom out there in the diabetes online community within all people with diabetes, and peer-to-peer sharing is good and needed and necessary. And I hope that you're open to learning from data shared by your patients and learning from what they learn from other peers. So if you're so inclined, go out and be an advocate for this concept. And I think that you'll really be sold when you hear Cherise, who's going to follow me now, and she's going to talk about some of her own great examples and exploring, even developing, and help supporting this new world. So now I will turn it back over.
Great. Thank you so much, Deborah. And I'm going to go ahead and we're going to skip the quick poll so we can move right into Cherise's presentation. And I'd like to reintroduce Cherise. And Cherise, just let us know when you're ready to go to the next slide, and we'll do that from this end. Thank you.
I am ready. Thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor and pleasure to actually share my point of view. So I was diagnosed with latent autoimmune diabetes in adults at the age of 23. I was in the Army Reserve, and my husband had just got stationed, actually deployed to Iraq. So I went to the hospital, the clinic, to find out what was going on because I had a yeast infection that I didn't get rid of. So the nurse practitioner, she was like, let's test you for diabetes. I'm like, diabetes? I don't have diabetes, and I don't have a family history of diabetes. She said, well, let's check. So when she checked my blood sugar, it was 345. At that point, I started crying because, like I said, no family history. I didn't know what to do. So she did a series of lab work. She sent me home with a meter and some metformin because I was 23. So she assumed that I had type 2. And when the lab work came back, she called me in, and she said, sorry, I don't know what to do with you. She said, I've never seen this before. You have antibodies like a type 1, but your pancreas is working like a type 2, so I'm going to send you to an endocrinologist. So when I walked into the endocrinologist a week later, he said, I already know what type of diabetes you have. You have type 1.5. And I looked at him like, what is type 1.5? And he was like, yeah, I get that a lot, but it's common for people that are thin, that don't fit the stereotype of a typical type 2. And he said, with your age and you're active, he said, I'm pretty sure that's what you have. So when he came back, and of course, 13 vials of blood later, I was diagnosed with latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. The first question I asked is first off, what is type 1 diabetes? And secondly, what is type 1.5? I had no clue that it existed. And he explained to me what it was by saying that it's a slow onset of type 1. Eventually, your pancreas is going to stop working. I just can't tell you when that's going to happen. So I had the option to go on oral medication. So I decided at the age of 23, why not? I might as well ride it out until it stops working. So at 23, I was placed on glipizide, and I was taking a half a pill a day and managing my diabetes well. My husband came home from Iraq, and a month later, I found out I was pregnant. So at that point, I was still explaining to everyone when I would go to different doctor's offices that I had type 1.5. They thought I was crazy. They told me it didn't exist, and I didn't know what I was talking about. So when I became insulin dependent in 2008, I was speaking with my nurse practitioner, who was kind of like my endocrinologist at the time, and he placed me on insulin. He said, you have an option. You can take 6 to 8 shots a day, or you can get an insulin pump. And once I got the insulin pump, my world changed. Even though I knew that there was nothing that I did to cause this, it put me in a frame of mind, like, oh my gosh, what could I have done to prevent this? And I cried once again, like I was re-diagnosed, because it's a whole different learning curve. You can go ahead and advance the slide, please. So at the time, I started doing research online about insulin pumps, and I found the diabetes online community. The first community I found was actually 2 Diabetes. And the reason why I joined 2 Diabetes is because when I was lurking, I started off reading, and then when I decided to join, there was an option there for type 1, type 2, gestational, and LATA. So it made me feel like I was at home, because at the time, the American Diabetes Association and the JDRF did not recognize or had no information about the type of diabetes that I was living with. So I actually found an organization, a community, people that understood what I was going through, that was available 24 hours. If I had questions, even something as simple as I ate a hot dog and some pork and beans and my blood sugar is high and I don't know what to do, this insulin pump is getting on my nerves, or I'm stressed out and I'm freaked out, it's a great place to tell stories and to share and to learn not only about type 1 diabetes, but type 2 diabetes, to learn about celiac, to learn about technology and the advances of research and what's needed. Please go ahead and advance. So a few communities, granted there are a lot out there, but as you can see, the You Are Not Alone, that's 2 Diabetes. That's the first community that I found. The community listed below it, it's pretty much a blog. But what I like about this blog is it was created by a type 1, but it shares experiences of a spouse that actually is trying to get her husband coverage for a continuous glucose monitor through Medicare, and she's having issues getting it approved, which came back denied. GLUE is a research community, kind of like patients like me, except it's strictly for people with type 1 diabetes to come together to share their experience, answer questions on just as simple as how often do you change your Lancet device. And Diatribe is kind of like the People magazine of the diabetes online community. It's a great resource to learn about what's new, what's now, what's next, and different experiences on living with diabetes, and also technology, which a lot of us have problems with understanding what's out there. Please advance. And this is where and how I started. I started off as a blogger because I wanted to share my story with diabetes. And then about 2 years after I started blogging, I found Twitter. And actually, I have to tell you, I am actually addicted to Twitter. And what I noticed is that there was a lot of people with diabetes, caregivers, healthcare professionals using Twitter, but there wasn't an organized place for discussion. So what I did is in June 2010, I created a weekly Twitter chat called DSMA, which stands for Diabetes Social Media Advocacy. And we get together and we talk about simple things like life with diabetes or depression and diabetes and technologies and how to just support each other. And it's amazing. There's different people from all different walks of life. There's people from Australia that participate, people from Nigeria. So it's not just people in the United States that join this conversation. And it happens weekly. And I know one of your questions, or the answer to the first poll, was people receiving the wrong information. And I think that even if you didn't participate in DSMA, if you use the hashtag DSMA and you kind of follow the conversation and you can see how it's going, there's also other communities out there. So for cancer, there's breast cancer social media weekly Twitter chat, and that hashtag is hashtag BCSM. That's another great resource. Just get in, get your feet wet, get used to the conversation, and when you feel comfortable, then you know where, and if you want to send your patient to that community to seek help, because we're only in the doctor's office, especially with diabetes, you know, every 3 months at the endocrinologist. But what happens in between that time is what's valuable. And peer support, it's not going anywhere. It's needed. People want it. And why not get the resources from you all? Please advance the next slide. People also use Facebook to connect. So, of course, there's people that are afraid to use Twitter because, one, they're scared of it, and secondly, they do not know how to use it. There are active communities on Facebook, like Diabetes Daily. It's a lot. I think they have over 100,000 followers on Facebook, and there's different questions that's asked daily and different resources provided by the Diabetes Daily team. And then there's also Diabetes Sisters. Diabetes Sisters is a great resource for women with diabetes, whether it's gestational, type 1, type 2. It's a great resource to understand what it's like living with menopause and pregnancy. So that's another resource on Facebook as well that we use. Please advance the slide. And another way, so we've pretty much been active in the community. I have for 5 years, but the community's been around, and bloggers for between 7 to 10 years. And now we're trying to figure out what's next. What else can we do? We know, pharma companies and technology device companies, they hear us, but what can we do with our voice? So last year, there was a campaign started called Spare a Rose, Save a Life. It's a campaign to raise dollars raise dollars to help children with type 1 diabetes that live in third world countries receive insulin. So this year was the second year that they did it, and they doubled the amount that they wanted. The initial goal was to raise $10,000, and as you can see, they raised over $27,000 for this cause, which is the International Diabetes Federation is behind the Life for a Child program. And then also another thing is that even though there are patient advocates out there, a lot of patient advocates, they don't understand how the FDA works. I mean, granted, it's definitely, as you know, it can be frustrating and it's hard to understand. So one of my colleagues, Bennett Dunlap, started a campaign called Strip Safely, and it's to make sure that we are receiving the accurate test strips that we need to monitor diabetes. So this year, actually last year, this campaign took off and over 4,000 people participated. So my thing is yes, we started off as bloggers, and now our community is growing, and this is the way we're growing. We're going to give back and to also educate ourselves and our counterparts to say, okay, this is what's happening in the world, and what can we do with our voices? And this is our next step, is advocacy. So that's pretty much the Diabetes Online community and how I got started. And what keeps me going is that, I know what it's like not to have that support, and I don't want anyone else to go through that. So I hope this helps you and guides you to help you guide your patients into seeking that support that they need. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Therese. We really appreciate you sharing both your story and also how you've evolved over time with your work online. I'm going to hand the question and answer session over to Hope. We do have a few minutes for questions. Hope's going to leave that. If members of the audience, if you have questions, just type them into the question panel of your dashboard, and you can take it away, Hope.
Great. So I think we can agree from my comments, Deborah's and Sharice's, that this e-patient and people engaging online is happening whether we like it or not. So hopefully you've gotten examples from both a healthcare professional, Deborah, and from Sharice, a DOC member, about how valuable this venue can be in improving patient care and helping support people, which is so critically important. So I'd like to jump off with a question to both Sharice and to Deborah to answer from their vantage points. And the question is, why and how should healthcare professionals introduce patients to online patient communities? And perhaps what are a few time-efficient ways within our busy clinical practices to do this? Deborah, do you want to go first?
Deborah, yeah, I'll jump in. So I think that obviously, whatever your specialty is, familiarizing yourself with some of the key online groups, to know what they are. Where I work, we're actually updating our diabetes book that we give to patients, and we have not had a list of online communities as part of our book before, and so we're actually adding that in as a back page, and we're kind of surveying ourselves, the community, to see kind of which are the key sites that we all have at least gone to, have some knowledge of, and feel confident that they're good resources. That said, we're also asking our patients which sites they use, because maybe there's new ones that we don't know about. So we're kind of crafting a list for us so we kind of keep it handy, so that it'll eventually be in our book. We can share it with people, and then as well as data tracking, mobile apps and stuff. We're kind of gathering together some lists of that to share. And I think that obviously clinicians don't have a lot of time to spend on the internet and trying to examine all the different sites. So maybe with a group of people in a work practice, each take turns and say, okay, well, here's 5 sites. Let's all go out and look at them and come back with insight. Okay, this site is good for support. This site is good for that, what have you. But obviously, as Sharice mentioned, and as we all know, people only spend a very, very small amount of time in the doctor's office or a provider's office. Most of their life living with disease is at home. And so we have to help them, provide them with resources, and support them when they bring resources to us, because they need help all the time. They need support all the time, and we can't do that for them.
So quickly, Sharice, if you have anything to add.
I was about to say, no, Deborah pretty much touched a lot of good points. I would also recommend that, there's a lot of, I know people are afraid of this as well, there are a lot of spammy websites, so getting together and actually figuring out what works best for your practice. And also, if you have questions about them as well, feel free to email someone from the community that you're trying to, or that you're thinking about, referring your patients to, so that way that you have an understanding and they get to understand who that person is as well.
Okay. Susan, can we take one question?
Sure. I'm actually going to, one of the questions that's come up is actually a question around, what's the opinion about trying to make your own online community for patients? So this is coming from a provider. Can we make our own online community for our own patients and keep it updated, I think, versus referring out to existing online communities? So I think if any of you want to provide your feedback on that, that would be great.
This is Hope. I'll respond. I think that's a very good idea. I would be cautious before jumping into that to really fully think how you are going to, what I call, nurture and feed the website. Really think through what kind of information do you want on there. Is it really static information that you want people to have access to? Is it forms that you want them to download prior to coming to see you? Would perhaps a Facebook page accomplish your goal and maybe inspire a little bit more dialogue? So Deborah, Sharice, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that.
This is Sharice. From a patient point of view, if it's going to be information about the practice and that's all you want to do, I would say do not do it. The reason and why the diabetes online community is so successful is it is created by people. Not to say that you can't create it, you can do it, but there's no strings attached. There's strictly information from peers about living with diabetes. So if you're thinking about creating something to that extent, I would go for it. But if you're not, I would not do it, because the issue with that is that you're not, you have to be in it, and you have to do it for the right reason, and the right reason is to provide support to the patient.
Good.
One thing I would just add is we have a weight management program, and there are groups of people, and we try to keep them engaged. And so sometimes the groups will have their own sort of email list. It's a very, old-fashioned way of providing support. But when that happens, it's really generated by one of the members of the group, and so it's facilitated by one of the group members, not led by us. We have talked about it as a healthcare system about peer support and what we can do, but we haven't ventured into it as of yet.
Good. So, Susan, I'm seeing that it is 2 o'clock.
Yes.
Should we bring this to a close?
Yeah, thank you. We're right up against our 2 o'clock, and I just want to thank all three of you, Hope, Sharice, and Deborah, for really providing your insights and perspectives on this important aspect of e-patients and the intersection with providers. So thank you again, and I really want to thank our audience for taking time out of your day to be part of the webinar today. Just very quickly, you will get a certificate of completion. It'll be in your Surround Health profile starting tomorrow. The archive of this webinar will be available, and again, you'll get an email notifying you when it's available. We'll do a resource list as well. And we please ask you to complete the feedback survey that will show up right after we close out the webinar. It pops up, and your feedback helps us know where to go in terms of next webinars. And so with that, I want to thank our sponsor, HealthNet, again, and thank all of you and our speakers for being part of the webinar today. Thank you, and have a good day.